So I'll tell you up front, that's supposed to be a picture of Nazareth. It must be true because it was on the internet. So now you know what it looks like. As you can see, the title for today is An Unexpected Life. We'll get into that in a little while. But, you know, when we get together beforehand to get ready for the service, one of the things that happens is we always have a word of the day, which the person who gets to preach tells the group what the word of the day is. And so today the word is unexpected. Somebody suggested that perhaps we should have gone with weird. It's been that kind of week. I knew that was probably the right choice when I'm sitting on the front row and a guy with a black cowboy hat and a mask sits down next to me. Now, I've seen Westerns. Nothing good happens when a guy comes in with a black cowboy hat and a mask. But since it's Nate, I guess it's okay. We'll be all right. So today, surprise, I wasn't expecting to be here either. You're on your third preacher. You thought you were getting out early today. I wasn't expecting to preach today until about, I think it was about 9 o'clock last night. I got a call from Jared who said, "I'm sorry, I've been exposed to somebody that has COVID. I can't preach. Can you cover tomorrow?" I said, "Okay, great, let's go." That's how it goes these days. So here we are. Let me tell you a little holiday story that kind of sets the mood for the times that we live in. Our family was really looking forward to the holidays this year. For those of you who don't know me, we have two children, my daughter and my son. Now, my daughter, quite unexpectedly, ended up moving to Colorado and marrying a guy out there. We didn't see that coming, but it happened, and so there it was. It got postponed a year because of COVID, but last year she got married. So we take the family out there for the wedding, which is what you do. And we went to church the Sunday before the wedding. The Umaggings lead the church there in Colorado Springs, who used to be here, and so we know them. We were excited to see them. And so we walk into church together, and they look at us, wave casually, and then see Caleb and say, "Caleb, what are you doing these days? We're looking for a campus intern." And the next thing you know, our son is moving to Colorado Springs as well. A short time ago, neither of our kids had set foot west of the Mississippi, and now they both live in Colorado Springs. What are the odds? That was unexpected. So now our kids live way across the country, but we were excited this Christmas. Both of them were going to be home for the holidays. So we've been looking forward to that for 4 months, and making preparations and getting the guest room ready and all of that stuff. And we're all excited, and here they come on their way. And Friday before they get there on the Sunday, Betsy starts feeling bad. And a short time later, we realized that Betsy has bronchitis. So it wasn't COVID, thankfully, but she had bronchitis, and she had a bad case of bronchitis. I felt terrible for her because I knew how much she was looking forward to it. And so I'm trying to, make up the slack, and then I start feeling bad. And so a few days behind her, I go through 10 days of having bronchitis. So the whole time the kids are there, we've got bronchitis and we're sick. I threatened to get T-shirts printed that said Sickmas 2021, but I didn't do it. It was not the holiday we had planned, but it was still a great time. That's kind of the way life is these days, isn't it? It doesn't go exactly like you planned. So today we're going to look at some things that are unexpected. There was an expected plan for the service today. The expected plan for the service was that Caleb was going to be here, and I was going to get to play music with Caleb again. I was going to listen to him play piano, and you guys were going to get to enjoy that. Unfortunately, Caleb's now on his way back to Colorado because he had some interaction with somebody that had COVID, so he didn't want to come to the service. So here we go. Things are different. The unexpected happened. So he's probably listening in as he's driving down the highway in his one-car quarantine. That's the way life goes sometimes. Jesus was the ultimate unexpected life. He was a surprise in many, many ways. And so that's what we're going to look at today, is how Jesus was unexpected. There's a number of ways Jesus was unexpected. Let's touch on a few of them. The first one, we'll take advantage of the fact that you probably have looked at this story over the last few days because of the season. His birth was completely unexpected. Look at Luke chapter 2. You say maybe, well, yeah, but wasn't that prophesied that it was going to happen that way? Yeah, it was prophesied, but you try being a single teenage girl that has an angel show up and say, oh, by the way, you're going to be pregnant. I'm thinking that was unexpected. In Luke chapter 2, we read about that, and she has the natural reaction when that happens. It comes, actually, it might be in chapter 1. Let me find my spot. Yes, chapter 1. Verse 27. It says, or back up a little bit. Let me find my place. I look like I'm missing words. Verse 26. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin to be pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of a greeting this might be. That's a common reaction to angels in the Bible. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus." It goes on, and she says, How can this be? I'm a virgin. He explains that it'll be of God. The angel also appears to Joseph, who was probably a little surprised as well to find out that his fiancée was expecting. He had a reaction. In Matthew chapter 1, you can read about that. We won't read it now. But he had a reaction that you might expect. Well, I think that I'll quietly step away because something has happened here. But the angel tells him, no, don't, go ahead and marry her. It's okay. It's of God. It was a shock. It was unexpected. Even from the very beginning, Jesus was a surprise. Jesus was unexpected in the sense that he was the Messiah. He wasn't the Messiah that they were looking for. I appreciated Max reading Isaiah 53. I was going to have to turn and read that, but he read it for you already. Jesus was not the king. He was not the majestic guy they were expecting as the Messiah. He was the worst sin in social media. He was ordinary. He wasn't exceptional. He wasn't majestic. Lightning bolts didn't come out. He was not what was expected. He was born in the wrong place, or so they thought. Nazareth. Look over in John chapter 1. I love this passage. As he enters his ministry and he's publicly starting to be known as who he was, he starts to call disciples. This is a reaction that he got fairly often. Andrew goes to call Nathanael, so he goes there. It says, Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, son of Joseph." Nazareth, can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. He later found out that something good could come from there, and later on they learned that he was actually born in Bethlehem. But that was the reaction Jesus got a lot. He was a common guy, the son of a carpenter. I'm sure he worked as a carpenter. He was a working class guy. Not what was expected. He was meek. He was quiet. He wasn't leading a rebellion or throwing the Romans out or doing any of the things that might have been expected. He was unexpected. He chose an interesting cast of characters to be his followers. Now, the people were probably surprised at the people he chose to be his apostles, but they weren't nearly as surprised as the apostles themselves probably were. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine the guys that he called? They must have felt like, me? You mean me, or do you mean some other guy? I mean, Peter, we love the apostles because we can relate to them. They were quite a cast of characters. They, too, were ordinary. I love the passage in Acts chapter 4 when they're being interrogated by the Sanhedrin, in describing them, his followers, it says, when they recognized that they were unschooled, ordinary men. That was their description. They weren't bad guys, but they were ordinary. They weren't an exceptional crew of followers. They were unschooled. Jesus didn't have any schooled apostles except one that came late. Paul was schooled, and of all the apostles, he was maybe the most unlikely. He described himself as one abnormally born. He was a persecutor of the church, and he was the one that was educated. Jesus had an unlikely group of people, and it was bad enough that his apostles were that way. He hung around with sinners. Look over in Luke chapter 7. This is a great story that we're not going to take the time to read all of, but there's a statement in the story that I want to read. This is when Jesus is being anointed by a sinful woman when he's at the home of Simon the Pharisee. And so it's a dinner in his honor. This woman who had lived a sinful life comes in and anoints his feet. And so she's weeping over his feet, wiping them with her hair, and anointing him. And this is going on, and everybody's watching. It creates a stir. But I want you to look at the attitude that the Pharisee had, what he said in his mind. It says, when the Pharisee, in verse 39, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. See, in the mind of Simon, there were only two possibilities going on here. One was that Jesus wasn't really a prophet and was obtuse and didn't know what kind of woman this was that was at his feet. Or the other possibility is that he was a compromised guy and wasn't a righteous man, because otherwise he wouldn't let this woman touch him. Those were the two options Simon saw. Jesus was the unexpected option. The option where he knew who she was and saw value in her and knew that God loved her and she could be restored and be a righteous woman. But that was unexpected. He got a lot of flack for hanging around with the wrong kind of people. He had a tax collector as one of his apostles. He had dinner at their houses. He got a lot of criticism for that. He was always unexpected in that way. Jesus was unexpected in the words that he spoke. They never knew what to do with him. We have one recording where he was 12 years old and he goes to the temple, and he really made a positive impression on the teachers of the law because of his knowledge at 12 years old. Once he got to adulthood, he caught more flack than he made a good impression a lot of times. But he drove them crazy. They didn't know what to do with him. He stumped them all the time. They were expecting him to go this way, and he went that way. I love the account in John chapter 7. Flip over there. John chapter 7, the leaders send out the temple guard to arrest Jesus because he's causing trouble. And so they go out to arrest him, but unfortunately for the leaders, they go out to arrest him while he's preaching, and the guards take a little bit too much time and start listening to him. And then they listen a little longer, and they go back empty-handed. Verse 45. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and the Pharisees, who asked them, "Why didn't you bring him in?" "No one ever spoke the way this man does," the guards replied. That was a reaction. When you heard him speak, the guys that went out to arrest Jesus were instead themselves arrested by his words. They didn't have any, they said, "I can't arrest this guy. Nobody ever spoke this way before." He was unexpected. Jesus did a lot of things that were unexpected. His whole ministry was unexpected. And then, the biggest surprise of all, he died. He goes through his ministry, and for years, he's gathering support. People are starting to understand who he is. They're fired up about him. He's got followers that have rallied behind him. He's drawing huge crowds. People have started to understand that this is the Messiah. He goes into Jerusalem to the cries of thousands that, Hosanna. He's the Christ. People are rallying behind him. It's finally happening. Here he is. But then he dies. A few days later, he's crucified. This is a shattering moment. His disciples don't know what to do. People are thrown into all kinds of chaos and confusion. How could he die? I mean, can you imagine? The apostles who had given up their life and followed him for 3 years, the crowds that had followed him from place to place, who had seen the miracles, who had heard the teaching, the guy that spoke like no one that had ever come before him. And there he is, crucified. How can that happen? We get a little bit of a sense of how they felt in Luke chapter 24. Flip over there. This is a great interaction that they have. But we're just going to read a little piece right now. This tells you how shocked they were, how much they were knocked for a loop. Starting partway through verse 19, that they're walking alongside a man on the road on the way to Emmaus. They don't realize it's Jesus because they've been kept from recognizing him. And so they're talking with him and interacting with them. And let's back up to verse 17. Jesus is talking to them even though they don't recognize him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel." That's where they were. They were shocked that the one that they had hoped was the Messiah had been crucified. It was the most surprising thing possible until he did something even more surprising. He rose from the dead. He reveals himself later in this same passage. In verse 25, after they recognize, or as they're getting ready to recognize, he said to them, "How foolish you are and slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. Later on in the passage, in verse 30, it says, "When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were open, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight." Now they realize that he's raised from the dead. Even more shocking, even more unexpected. All of this was written before it happened. Jesus had even told them, I'm going to die, but I'm going to come back. They couldn't hear it. It was too unexpected. They were living through it, and they didn't see it. It was a surprise. Then he leaves them. At the end of the chapter, he goes back to heaven. You know, when he finally comes back from the dead, surely that's the moment that everything's going to work out and go the way we expected to. Nope, he goes back to heaven and leaves them on earth. Completely unexpected. That's in verse 50. Here's the thing. All of this was part of God's plan. None of it was unexpected to God, but it was unexpected to the people going through it. God had talked about it 1,000 years before, more than that, before it happened. You know, Max read the passage in Isaiah 53 about how it was all going to happen. It was a known thing. It was part of God's plan from the beginning. Jesus was exactly who he was supposed to be. The story went exactly the way it was supposed to go. But it was shocking to the people who were there with him. It was shocking to the people going through it. That's the way life happens a lot of the time. Let's talk about our unexpected life, because we're having to deal with lots of unexpected things these days, aren't we? The crowd's a lot smaller today than it's been lately, except for out in live stream world. And we love you guys out there. We're thinking of you that are not able to be here. But we're going through strange times. A lot of people are out because of COVID protocols and other issues going on. Our life has a lot of unexpected wrinkles. I wanted to make a few points for us today as we go through this time together. One, you'll be surprised by what happens in life. God will not. Nothing that happened in the life of Jesus, which we're using as kind of a jumping off point to discuss, but nothing that happened in his life surprised God. Nothing that happens in your life surprises God. It's important to know that because if God's surprised, we're in trouble. But he's not. He knows exactly what he's doing and exactly what is going on. And that should give us confidence and hope as we think about that. Number 2, say yes to God and don't let go. It's interesting when you go through stuff, we can get discouraged, can't we? I mean, as Betsy and I were going through the stuff with the holidays that we were going through, that was one of the things we had to fight in addition to sickness, is just being discouraged. I mean, we had been so looking forward to the time with the kids being there, and we had all these activities planned, some of which we did, some of which we didn't. But we had all these things planned, and we were going to have all this energy and play games and stay up late and watch, Christmas movies and have a great time together. And a lot of that stuff we just didn't have the energy for. That when you go through things like that, it can take the heart out of you. Don't let discouragement get you. Don't let go. I think that very often Satan's primary weapon against us as disciples is for us to get discouraged, especially if we've been around for a while. You go through hard times, you can let go. Don't do it. And we've got to keep saying yes to God. Sometimes we say no when we're confused. Have you noticed that? If we need to make a decision and it's right there in front of us and we're not sure what's happening, our reaction is to say no and pull back. That happened to people in the scriptures. Jesus had followers, but there were other people who had the opportunity to be his followers that said no instead. We know the story of the rich young ruler. Jesus loved him. He gave him a path where he said, go do this and come follow me. And he said no. There were other people that said no to him. And sometimes things are right there in front of us, and we say no because we aren't sure how we're moving forward. Don't say no to God. Don't let go. Hang in there. even when things are unexpected. You know, we're very often not in a good position to evaluate what's good or bad. Have you noticed that? Especially if you're older and you've lived life for a while, you figure out looking back that you're not always very good in the moment of figuring out whether a thing is a good thing or a bad thing. Now, look, I understand that a lot of us has been through some tough stuff over the past period of time. And I don't understand all that, and I know some things are just hard. Okay, so I appreciate that. But a lot of times we don't know how God is working and what's good and bad. Here's the interesting thing. In the story that we kind of ran through very quickly, looking at the life of Jesus, some of the greatest moments in human history were the ones that at the time seemed the darkest. That's important. I mean, Jesus dies on the cross, and for his followers and the people who had hopes of him being the Messiah, that by all appearances looked like the low point. It all fell apart. He died. He's gone. What happened? It was not the low point. It was the most important thing. It was what he came for. It was what was going to give us the ability to know God and to have a relationship with him and be restored. It had to happen, but they didn't recognize that. It was a great moment that looked like a dark moment. We live through those all of the time. We've got to remember that when we're in those times that we feel like, man, this is bad. Well, it might be, there might be bad things that go on in our life, but a lot of the time when we feel like this is bad, God is working out something great that we just haven't recognized yet. And maybe we'll recognize it later, and maybe we won't. But God is always at work. We've got to trust him when we get in those spots. And God will do great things. I already made that point. God is always at work. We've got to watch and pray. Pay attention. Now look, if you have this idea that you're going to come up to me afterwards and you're going to tell me, look, this is what's going on in my life. Could you explain to me what's happening? No, I'm sorry, I can't. I don't even know, if you can explain what's going on in my life, I'd appreciate it. But, I don't think you probably can either. It's not like I have the answers, but God has the answers. And we will find the answers if we hang on to him and we watch and pray and we stay faithful. That's the key to this thing. It unfolded little by little. Read the book of Acts. If you read the book of Acts, you'll read the story of ordinary people who have no idea what is going on, but they keep watching and praying and they keep moving forward in faith, and God does amazing things through their life. And I think that we could parachute in at any moment in time in the book of Acts and ask the leaders, what's the plan? And they would say, I've got no idea. I have no idea what's going on. We're going to get together and pray and keep doing what we think is the right thing, and God seems to keep working it out somehow. That's the way it worked. It doesn't work differently in our day. I got news for you. It works the same way now. We've got to watch and pray and listen for God's direction and keep sticking with his word and doing the right thing. So I'll leave you with this. Happy New Year. If today isn't a clue, I don't know what is. Expect the unexpected in the year to come. Keep the faith. God's going to do great things in the year ahead. He's done great things in the past 2 years. We love you guys, and let's have a great 2022 together. I got it right the first time. I'll mess it up several times in the coming week. But it's great to be together. God's going to do great things in this year. Let's keep leaning on him and praying, and he'll do great things in the year to come. Thanks.